that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome to Through a Scottish Prism. A terrible week, as a load of us are stunned and shocked at what happened on yesterday, Saturday in North Macedonia, where the giant of the Scottish political scene, probably the greatest politician of them all that Scotland's ever produced, or ever likely to produce, was sadly taken from us too early. And his legacy, fortunately, will live on, and we must take strength from it. It saddens me. In the last few weeks and months, we've had a couple of stalwarts. We had Big Ian Lawson, another one whose boots will be impossible to fill, and Alec. And we're going to do our best. And I'm sorry, we're a few minutes late getting out this week, but we had to change direction at the last minute, as you can appreciate, to cover this. And we're doing our best to bring together our memories and thoughts of the great man himself, and where we as a movement go from here, and what we can learn, what we should know, and what can possibly take away this pain, I don't know. But let's get everyone in now. Let's get Eva, Lloyd, and Phil in, and we have a special guest from the Scottish Resistance, and who was meant to go on the show, and we're going to be talking about that. And every week we intend to bring in one of the different groupings, because we still believe in the unity of the movement. And I'm delighted to welcome James Scott from the Scottish Resistance Group. James, welcome. And I'm sorry it's on such an occasion where events have overtaken us, and possibly, some other time we can come back and we can talk more about the Scottish Resistance.
Yeah, that would be fine. It is a very, very sad day yesterday. Very sad.
It is. I've got to say, Eva, I know, having spoken to you last night, the sadness and the shock, it's difficult to put into words, but what I'm finding the most disgusting thing about it is people who spent decades attacking the man, the people who stabbed him in the back, who treated him appallingly, who removed him from the history of the SNP, are now coming on and extolling his virtues. The hypocrisy just adds to the pain of losing the great man.
Well, first of all of our hearts go out to Alex, widow Moira, and the wider family. But this is a tragedy for the family, for Alec, for our movement, and for our country. You can see the impact it's had on me, and I know that is replicated nationwide, because what Alex Salmond did was he gave our country and our people hope, and it's such a precious, precious thing. I'm looking above me at a framed version of the 2011 Scottish election result, when the map turned yellow, in Alex's words. This party, the Scottish Party, the National Party, carries your hope, and we shall carry it carefully. And that is what that man did throughout his life, throughout his political career. He put his country and the people of his country first. And those who forgot that in the course of the last few years, well, hell mend them. But perhaps this most horrific of opportunities or events will be an opportunity where people will have a reset and work together for the thing that Alec gave his life for, the good of our country and the prosperity of our nation. It's a dark, dark day, and I don't want to hear any talk of division or people being hypocritical about those events that have occurred in the past. We know who they are, we know what they said, and we know those who remained silent, and we know those who knifed him in the front as well as in the back. And history will be kind to Alec, because that's what he deserves. But history, in the fullness of time, will deal with the others exactly how they ought to be dealt with.
Absolutely, well said, Eva. Lloyd, you worked very closely with Alec and knew him over decades. You must have great sadness like the rest of us, but you must also have some very fond memories of the man.
I have many, many fond memories, but to be honest with you, Roddy, the shock of hearing what happened yesterday, I'm finding it extremely difficult to string together any coherent kind of narrative. That, you know, it's only in circumstances like this you realise that, I mean, Alex has been in my life, or in the background of my life, or in the centre of my life for nearly 50 years, since I first joined the party and heard of him. And then there's many things to think about, but I think, as Eva said, today and the coming days are the days for us to take strength from the wisdom that Alex left behind. There's much that he said. Indeed, even the very last, I think, contribution he made on Twitter before his death was a statement of what all people who believe in an independent and free Scotland should approach the coming months and years. And that's an understanding of, to some degree, a resistance. I'm finding it extremely difficult to talk about this. Alec was a giant, of that there is no question. One of the great strengths of a giant is they have the ability to forgive. And one of Alec's great strengths was the fact that he, in all the time I knew him, both in a working relationship directly in the Parliament or in the many times that I interviewed him on television, the one thing that he never ever carried was resentment from one time to the next. He had an understanding that each day was a new day. Until we achieved our aim, each day was a new day leading to the day we all want, which was the day of independence. I think for me, the hardest thing is to begin to think of what must have been going through his mind and through his brain over the past 3 or 4 years during this period of vilification. And the fact that he's had to put up with so many people who effectively would not have careers, would not be known to the public if it wasn't for Alex's intervention in their lives. And those very people who made interventions in his life, which removed him from public history and created a situation where a man of great power, of great intellect, has been publicly vilified. These people should never sleep well again.
I agree wholeheartedly. You also, Phil, worked closely with Alec and Hume over many years. When Alec first appeared, even after all had been done to him, he held out the hand of friendship towards the SNP because he knew for Scotland it was the right thing to do. He's been proved right. The supermajority was what was required at that time, but they rejected it. But he still, as Lloyd alluded to, forgiveness was in his heart when he tried again to get Scotland united, and again they refused to listen to him. He always put Scotland first. Have we lost you, Phil? Are you still there?
Yeah. You know, I can hear you. Just you were breaking up a wee bit, Roddy, and my battery's getting low, so I'm plugging it in. But no, this guy is a massive loss, and if there's anything that comes out of this, it's the understanding that unification is what it's all about, because that's what Alex.
Oops, looks like we've lost Phil for the moment. Turns out it wasn't me, it was breaking up. James, while we're waiting, Phil coming back, how have you found the last 12 hours or so?
It's been horrendous. I met Alec many times, but the last time I met him, what sticks in my mind particularly, because I met him at one of the ALBA meetings in Glasgow, and I approached him and I spoke to him about the referendum, and I said, if the referendum was held again, you would ensure that they wouldn't be able to get away with all the things that they did in the referendum in 2014, like bringing all the heads of industry to Downing Street, like approaching other countries, the President of the United States, Obama, and getting to speak out against independence. So Alex was in total agreement with that. He said it's most important. This is really important. What I'm going to say. It's very important that if we ever get the chance to have another referendum, we make it very clear that if they interfere by getting outside sources speaking out against independence, like the President of the United States, or if they call off the heads of industry to Downing Street, then the referendum would be deemed irrelevant. It would be scrapped. It wouldn't count. We've got to make that clear, that if we get another referendum, it's done fairly, because the 2014 referendum was definitely not fair.
Oh, there we've got Phil back. Phil, we lost you there. You were in the middle of saying about Alex, your memories.
Yeah, it's like a massive loss. We all know that. But for me, his last message is poignant, as his message was throughout. You work together and you stick by each other. You forgive our little, the little things that make us different, that we should celebrate. But you don't go to war with each other. You don't snide. You're not underhand in how you approach the cause. The cause comes first. That's the thing I got from it. And regardless of the games and the black arts that exist in politics, it's just how politics are. You really have to remember that the unification message that he put forward is the winning one. When he put his hand out, even after how he'd been treated, how people at Nicola and those who have betrayed us, treated Alex Salmond, was disgusted me, absolutely disgusted me, and it enraged me. And it got to the point when I really had to do something about it and stand up and say what I believed in. I was thrown out of the SNP for it. But so be it. So be it. You know, sometimes you've got to stand up for a principle, and the core principle of independence is what he stood for. The organisation that is the independence movement in Scotland, which Alex was primary in building and taking us as close as we've ever come to gaining self-determination for our people in our country. This movement will be even more disjointed without Alex, because he was one who was trying to pull it together. And it stemmed, the deconstruction of us stemmed from the SNP falling apart and the bad actors of the British state. They're in bed with the same people who influence how the West thinks and behaves. The problem is most folk are oblivious to this fact, and it's something others have touched on. This is why the Queen, the President, the States all pitched in with anti-Scottish independence messages before the 2014 referendum. You can't trust these people. You can't trust the lobbyists, you can't trust the state, you can't trust the establishment. And if you're getting your information from mainstream media and nowhere else, then put simply, you're not well informed. You're being brainwashed. So when you give opinion on current affairs or politics, and this goes to all the people that have been mentioned by my colleagues here that have been snidey and had a wee dig, consider this. You're not well informed, you're being brainwashed. So when you give opinion on current affairs and politics, then all you're doing really is spouting Daily Express headlines. Also, all of us, think before you speak, please. What do you actually know? Are you just repeating what you've heard? Do you know it? Have you done any research? Have you checked out the facts? What I mean, it's people get lazy. You know, this is why people judge, because thinking is hard. The due process that takes you to consider the evidence, weigh it up and make an informed and fair decision takes a lot of effort. Too many people just spout the same glib sound bites they're fed, and that is the measure of you, not the individual you think you're judging. So for all of you, I mean, and there's something, I think I made this one up. And it's because I come from a successful family and everybody's really well, and a lot of them are unionists. So it comes from this. Successful people have a very high opinion of their own opinions, even on issues they know little or nothing about. In politics, nothing is truer. You can be successful in business, you can be successful and use other metrics, but in reality, how you treat the people in our society that are less well off than you, how you treat service, people that are providing you service, waiters and such like, that's how I measure people. You know, it's not the big I ams that I listen to, and that's one of the things I saw with Alex. Alex was a giant, not perfect, but he was our greatest success and hope for the future, and sadly he's been taken.
Yeah, hyperbole. I've heard some things, but this is, I don't call it hyperbole. Someone in a tweet last night linked, the three greats, the Bruce, the Wallace, and the Salmond, and brought a lump to my throat. It is again. And you know what? I don't think it's hyperbole. It's quite a thing. I think he's up there with the greats, Eva. But here's an interview he did a while ago with Leslie Riddoch. And I think it's quite poignant, and we've discussed it, and I wonder how different it would have been if he had taken this action.
What is your biggest political mistake?
Resigning.
Right.
That was...
Oh, what happened
What is
there?
your biggest
Sorry
political
about that.
mistake?
Resigning.
Right.
That was a mistake. I thought things were well set for the future. I didn't actually think independence could fail in a 10, 15-year project. I thought the people...
Eva, that was his biggest mistake. I truly believe that if he had not resigned, we would today be independent.
I don't disagree, Roddy, because the greatness of the man was that he could talk with all sorts of people from all sorts and walks of life. Whilst he was a visionary and highly intelligent and had a brain like a computer, he never ever lost touch with reality. And I think perhaps that was his greatest attribute, that he understood people, he understood humanity, and he understood human want and need. And perhaps that's why some of the biggest ticket transformations in Scotland were the ones that he was so proud of, whether that was, tuition fees, the ability for every child in Scotland to have an education and to have the chance to get to university unencumbered by financial constraints. The rocks will melt in the sun. Well, that stone needs to be seen again. It needs to be visible somewhere in Scotland where we can all pay tribute to the greatness of the man. Education, equality, a route out of poverty, opportunity, the greatest of things, the greatest of ambitions. Those were his ambitions, but not just for those who supported him or who supported independence, but for everybody. And that's the point. People who didn't want independence supported the SNP when he led it, and they supported Alex Salmond. They respected him. They admired him. The tributes that are coming to him from unionists are at times far more poignant than those who claim to be within the independence movement, because he was one of the greatest that our country has ever seen. He wasn't John Smith, he wasn't Donald Dewar, he was head and shoulders above them in terms of the transformation of our country. You think back to before his election in 2007 as First Minister the first time round, or think back to what Scotland was like prior to devolution. Alex Salmond was one of the men in the forefront of that campaign, and were it not for him, Scotland would be a far worse place than it is today. Look at the list of his achievements. They're phenomenal. I know there's a petition to rename the Queensferry Crossing the Alex Salmond Bridge. Well, of course it should be. That's a no-brainer. There's also some mention by some people that his funeral should be an election. That's a family matter. But I hope that there will be a proper memorial service to him, because he was a giant of our movement and a giant of our country, and we can never let that be forgotten or let his reputation continue to be besmirched by those who should know better. I hope that the campaigns for justice for him continue, and I hope that the evidence that he had wanted to see the light of day will indeed see the light of day in the fullness of time, because his memory and his achievements and his family and his loved ones deserve nothing less.
Indeed. Lloyd, I'm sure you'll agree, it was his biggest mistake was resigning. We know what his second biggest mistake was, but his resigning was a big mistake.
Yes, it was. But it was, in some ways, I remember very clearly thinking to myself, yeah, this is Alec, this is exactly what he would do, while at the back of my mind thinking, I'm not certain this is the right thing to do. In the end, I think his his own personal kind of morality, his own personal standards, forced him to take that action. But I think history tells us it was not the best decision for the country in reality. But then again, you have to think of it from another point of view. 10 years as leader of the party, then Westminster, then back to Scotland, leader of the party, First Minister, driving forward all the time to get the referendum set and running for 2014. I mean, the man could barely have slept, really. I mean, holidays were things that didn't happen for him for a good 20 years. So, you know, in some ways, in resigning was the right thing to do to recharge his batteries. But I think the major difference there would have been had he not resigned would have been when Phil and the 56 were elected the following year. Then I think there would have been a plan B, the obvious plan B, which was we had the majority of seats at Westminster, therefore we begin negotiations for our independence. And I believe of any of the politicians alive in Scotland at that time, the only one who was in a fit state to actually lead us through those negotiations was Alex Salmond. That's just a fact. I find it extraordinary, and I think maybe history will tell us in time, when the full story emerges, that I'm sure he tried to provide advice for the leader of the Scottish National Party that followed him after that huge success in 2015 in the Westminster election, and I believe that person didn't listen properly. For if they had, and if Alec had been in charge in 2015, there is no question, Roddy, you are absolutely correct. We would have become an independent country either then or very, very soon after.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what upset me more on the 19th of September, Phil, was losing the referendum or losing Alec. In fact, that was the day I decided to leave the country and move to Catalonia. That was actually the catalyst for me to move. What upset you more, losing the referendum or losing Alec?
It's got to be the referendum, because, like Alex, it's not about one individual person, and this is what is very, very striking when you compare the behaviours of other politicians. He said his biggest failure was resigning. Yes, it was. I was surprised. I wasn't as visionary as Lloyd. I didn't see that it might have been a big mistake, because I thought it was done. It was certainly done with the best intentions, and my point to know, I believe, is it's not for his glory. He stood aside, not for his glory, but for the benefit of the people of Scotland. And that's why he did it. He thought it was the right thing to do. And as he says, he thought it was all set up. He'd done his part. Without doubt, he'd set the scene. He'd set the story out. But the story of Nicola's betrayal of the people, and of Alex in particular, must now come out. Because who's it going to damage? The only people that can be damaged by those who have been guilty of what they've been guilty of, and that needs to come out now. Alex was tainted by this, and those sheep who believe what they want to believe in, and we're all guilty of that from time to time. We all get lazy, and we all believe what we want to believe from time to time. If you had done your homework, you would see that this was a complete stitch up. But the establishment and the press refused to allow that information to come out. They need to be prosecuted. They need to be seen for what they are and put in their place. When I saw what Alex did, I to one degree believed that it was the right idea. Why? Because I had this notion in my head, well, why would someone like that do that? Why? He's the big guy, he's the number one, and he steps aside, brings his protege in, which we all know is the right way. You look at Hamas, look at these organisations, look at Sinn Féin. Any organisation that's built that is anti-establishment always has a succession plan, and it's tight, but they're cellular, they work, and they just get stronger. Here, we're not going to get stronger. This is another blow. This is another blow, because who's left in place? Nicola and her ilk. When I saw her come in, I didn't know her as well as I knew Alec. I didn't know as much about her as I knew about Alec. But what I saw from Alec's manoeuvre was He suffered the slings and arrows of the press. They came after him. The establishment were after him. He was the danger. He was the one they feared. So that's who they came after. And he was the shield, taking us towards independence. Shield full of arrows. He threw the shield aside and she came rocketing right through and shocked everybody, all of us. Nobody saw it coming. That's what was brilliant about it. That is the strategic genius of Alex Salmond, because make no mistake, that's not her idea. I don't think she's had an original thought in her mind. It now transpires, other than looking after number one and shitting on people or getting your way. So, no, for me, Alex's strategy here was very clever, and she was presented a golden opportunity. He was right. He was right. She was given the keys of an independent Scotland, and she sold them. Simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. James, the fact is, we've mentioned the 56 MPs that were elected in 2015. That was down to Alex Salmond, not Nicola Sturgeon or anyone else. That was down to him and the building blocks he had put in place.
Of course it was. He was the man that built up the party. And, I mean, I'm disgusted the way this man's been treated over the years. Once Nicola Sturgeon got in, it was like, it reminds you Shakespeare, Et tu, Brute. She stabbed the man in the back, let's face it. She wanted rid of him. She wanted rid of him. And the Unionists loved the fact that the nationalist movement was split. And they have taken advantage, guys. They have taken advantage of the fact that the party was split. And by the way, I mean, I've voted SNP all my life, over 40 years. But when I went to the polls the last time, I come out after voting SNP. My entire family were SNP voters, and most of them didn't even go to the polls because they were so disgusted with them. I come out of the polling place, and all the guy for the SNP could talk about was all this woke crap. Instead of talking about independence, says, what about independence? Oh, we've got to deal with all the other things first, like transgender and non-binary. Just a minute. The aim of the Scottish National Party is to get independence. All these things can be discussed later. But no, he was just into the woke stuff and all this bloody non-gender stuff. And I was disgusted. I really don't think I'll be voting SNP again. And that's all I've ever voted for over 40 years.
Yeah. Eva, when we talk about what was best for the country and all that, but it turned out it wasn't best for the party either when he resigned. Because it has, I mean, there was the rise was still from what Alec had built, and then it plateaued, and now it's heading south. So leaving was bad for the country and bad for the party.
Well, clearly it was, and I don't know where the SNP will go from here, because I don't see any sign of recovery under John Swinney, and I don't see anybody coming behind him who has the guts, the savvy, the balls, the vision, the determination that Alex Salmond had to actually lead an independence campaign. So it's going to be up to others to do it, other political parties and other people of independent mind. I would like to think, as I said earlier, that this tragedy would lead to unity within the movement, but it's going to need a lot of people to apologise privately to each other and then get on with the job. And I don't know if we've got big enough people across the movement who have the guts to say and do the things that need to be said and done. I hope that we do, but it's a very, very black day today. I think that there will be some in the SNP who genuinely feel like we do, a absolutely tragic sense of loss. But I hope that they're able to persuade their leaders to do something tangible to take our movement back to focus on independence, because otherwise what 2026 will be a bloodbath for the SNP. I had been looking forward actually to Alec being elected again to the Scottish Parliament in 26. I thought even if there was no independence majority, but he had a seat in there, he'd be driving the show again, because he was driving the show even when he wasn't there. So I wish that had happened. The fact that it won't is an enormous regret. But there are other things that can be done. I mean, I know Angus Brendan McNeil is absolutely heartbroken. I've read his tweets. I just read one there from Fergus Ewing. These are intelligent, driven men with history and experience and knowledge. The SNP should be listening to them and talking to them and to Joanna Cherry and to others like her about how the show gets back on the road again. It's about priorities. It's about not self and not party, but country. And that's what needs to be the emphasis. You know, Alex's last tweet, as we've said already, it's about country. Scotland is a country, not a county. And those in the SNP need to remember that and remember what their raison d'etre is.
Yeah, absolutely. And here on Prism, open invitation to anyone from all parties and anyone who wants to come together. We'll facilitate it in any way, shape we can. We're open to unity, and I will hold hands with anyone that wants independence. Irrespective of other views, I will do that. And I'm sure my own colleagues can speak for themselves. I'm hoping, because we put this show together rather hurriedly, folks, we hadn't planned, obviously, this show. And I'm just hoping this next video works, Lloyd, because while he was a brilliant and a strategist and everything else, he knew how to kick arse, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Caremongering. Order. Of what Nicholl Stephen has been accused by this week in the northeast of Scotland. Hence, I suspect the change in emphasis of his questioning today.
Not going to work, I'm afraid. It hasn't worked. We didn't download it in time to do it. But he actually, if you remember that night, he absolutely, Nicholl Stephen had talked about, what's it people called Nicola and Nicola? What is it? There's some connection there. He ripped him a new one who had accused him of sleaze, and of course they'd been found not guilty, because every other week they seemed to come up with a sleaze attack on Alex, and none of them ever stuck because none of them were ever true. But he knew how he really whipped into him. He wasn't worried about offending people.
Absolutely not. Alec understood the nature of the rough and tumble, and that was a lot to do with the fact that he had been at Westminster at a time when there were still what would be termed true giants of politics, people who could speak without notes for hours and hours and hours and be extremely witty and extremely intelligent at the same time. Alec grew up with that and had that power. Nicholl Stephen, I think, this is the first time I've smiled this morning, but thinking back on Nicholl Stephen, and in some ways it was like taking candy off a baby, because Nicholl Stephen was never up to being an MSP, never mind being a junior minister. And even the Liberals realised that and got shot of him as quickly as they could and shoved him up into the House of Lords like they always do. But I myself was never on the receiving end, really, of the rough tongue. I think the most I ever got from him was that look of disappointment. And I have to say, the look of disappointment from him was considerably more effective than the harsh words of 100 other people that I know. But watching him there, the way he commanded the room, in a room that had some people who had, had real kind of strength and presence about them. Margot MacDonald, John Farquhar Munro, even Lord James Douglas Hamilton, McCletchy, Donald Dewar himself. But Alec stood head and shoulders above them. And the primary reason for that was, in actual fact, his intellectual depth. Because Alec had a depth and an intellect that was quite extraordinary. But at the same time, it was like he was his own Roman general slave saying into his own ear, "Remember, you are mortal," because his ability to connect with ordinary people was extraordinary. And it always irritates me when I hear and I know a politician comes on and said, "Yeah, but when I was knocking on doors," when they've not knocked on a door in 10, 15 years. Alec, because he was so well known, had a, it wasn't an issue of knocking on doors. But what Alec always did from the day and hour that he became elected was he would go to the small town, to a little area of a particular city, and go to the bookies or go into the butchers or go into the newsagent and just chat to people. And Alec maintained his connection with people in his own personal way. He didn't look for the party lackeys in any particular area to make sure that he was lined up with somebody who was going to be nice to him, say the right things to him, because he knew there was no worth in that. And that as the leader of a party leading a country supposedly to independence, there was no time to spare. Every minute that he had to be applied properly to learn something that would move us forward, or for him to be able to impart to the populace. Because one of the things Alec understood, and very few politicians understand, is the nature of gossip. If you go into a small community and you chat with people, that will spread like wildfire through that area. It's how you develop a voting strategy. It's how you communicate your message. He understood this because politics is a simple thing, and it's about the connection person to person. Alec understood that far, far more than any of those who could come behind him in his wake.
Yeah, I mean, there was a great picture, a video of him in 2021, where actually he was sitting in a wall in Aberdeenshire with another sad loss we had of Trish. He was sitting in a wall just chatting to her during the campaign. As you say, he had that common touch. He had the ability to move up and down the spectrum, did he not, Phil? He could talk with high Hegians, but he could also get down there with anyone and everyone and have a connection.
Yeah, I'm reminded there was something when you look at Rudyard Kipling's If, when you can talk to the common folk, but and talk to kings, but not lose the common touch. Very much a man for all seasons in that respect. I often thought he understood people. That it's as simple as that, and for all, you can't help but be affected by the attention you get and the focus you get. But the sleaze, the attention he got primarily from the enemy was to take him down, and he fought off the sleaze. Some people would like to think he hasn't, but he did. And it's the primary tool of the establishment. Look at Julian Assange and the threat he was to the establishment, false allegations of rape. Craig Murray, who subsequently went to prison for jigsaw identification, which is utter disgraceful. Why was he in the spotlight? Because Craig Murray had the courage and the principle. He suffered the similar trick when he had the courage to stand up to the British state under extraordinary rendition, when it was moving people around the world to be buried in the Kazalkum desert. When he was the ambassador for Uzbekistan, but by God was Alex Salmond targeted all his political life because he was a threat. He was a threat to the British establishment, and that's what we should never forget. He was on our side. He was our working class hero. He was our guy who stood up to the man, and it cost you. Now, it really has cost him. The price that he has paid. I mean, I'm not going to go into, I know, I'm aware of some of the things that have happened to him and what happened in his personal life. But do you know what? So what? So what? You're a human being, and you suffer. You suffer at the hands of the establishment, and they're out to get you. Obviously, I knew him really well working with Alex, because I started Yes Aberdeen and Yes Aberdeenshire, and I worked when I was organiser of Aberdeenshire West. Obviously, Alex was Aberdeenshire East, and up in the north. And one of his really strongest teams was Aberdeenshire East. They were a force to be reckoned with in the independence movement in the northeast. Great people who've also gone, by the way. And also when I was running Yes Aberdeenshire for the campaign, I came across Alec a lot. And it was when he turned up, it's just as Lloyd and everyone said, he turned up at events, and he wasn't the megaphone guy. He would sit there and talk to the wee wifey in the street. He would wander about the markets. He wasn't looking for stage setup, and there's that. I mean, I did a couple of things with the Guardian in the campaign, and there was a couple of video shows that would come out, and there was people within the SNP who set up these these meetings with people, and it was so obviously framed. He saw right through that. He understood how people work, and he was a communicator, and he was a listener. And he dealt with the crap that people threw at him, and I took my hat off to him. How he remained calm in the maybe in the eye of these storms, but my God, I don't know how I could have survived what he went through. And that's the thing that got me the most. He was targeted all his political life, and the hardest hit came from within. It came from within. And that's what sickens me when you get people like Nicola Sturgeon. You're a disgrace. You sicken me. And people like you, everybody of your ilk, everybody that goes along with that. And, we shouldn't forget that. We must not forget it. For me, I don't know when and how they can ever recover, because I will not. I will not forget what they've done. We should not allow anyone. The story must come out, and we must see what they've done. And if you're genuinely sorry for what you've done, then you don't get to continue in a senior role. You get busted right down to sapper again. And if you want to work with the people, you need to work for the people, and do what you're told this time. But no, you've shot your bolt. As far as I'm concerned, Nicola and all of the current leadership of the SNP, they'll come out with whatever they're going to come out with. But it'll just make you it'll give you the book. To hell with these people. We still need more pain before we can start gaining again the ground that we've lost by the deconstruction of our organisation and the lies that have been told about Alex Salmond.
Indeed. James, the attacks he took for decades, for as long as I can remember, going back to the 90s, he was constantly in oh, he's like Marmite, he's this, that and the next thing. It must have taken its toll on him. But he was such a strong character. He rode through it all.
Yeah, I think it's taken its toll on him. I think it's led to his early death, I believe. I really do believe that. He was a great debater. Let's face it, folks. He was probably the best political debater that we've ever had in Scotland. Now, he also broke through lines where other nationalists never broke through. He used to appear quite often in the morning line. We're not all into horse racing, but he appeared often in the morning line on a Saturday morning because he was right into the horse racing. I think Lloyd mentioned that. And he got on well with all the people in that show, The Morning Line. Apart from one guy, I don't know if you remember, John McCririck. Well, he absolutely done his nut, and he said, why are they allowing this guy on? He wants to break up the United Kingdom. But he was shown the door, by the way, because people in the Morning Line group wanted Alec to be there. He had a good knowledge of horse racing. Just one of many, many things that Alec had a lot of knowledge of. Another good thing I've been watching, I don't know if you guys watch Talk TV. Alec appeared many times on Mike Graham's show. And it's one of the shows where Alec was allowed to speak, not with the restrictions you get when you're talking to in a BBC interview, where it's very restricted and you cannot say what you feel. He got on great with Mike Graham, and I'm going to watch later today to see if Mike says something, because Mike Graham did get on very well with Alec. He did break through barriers where other independence people were unable to get through. And that's what I'll always remember. There's nobody can replace him. Nobody.
No, indeed, some of the foreign the compliments have been paid to him have been far outstripped anything of the falseness of some of the BBC correspondents and the ones who weren't standing by him when he stood by. Eva, you can't replace a man like that. But where does Alba and the movement go now without him?
Very, very difficult to see what happens from here on in. Because as we've said already, Alex's abilities were the stuff of legends. Phil was spot on talking about how Alec was able to speak with kings and men and never lose the common touch. I saw him so many times doing little kindnesses and little favours for people that would go almost unnoticed, that you certainly never saw other great politicians doing, literally putting his hand in his pocket surreptitiously to slip somebody sitting on a park bench a fiver because he thought that they were skint, that kind of thing. I know there's many other stories like that coming out about him now that were supposed to be kept secret. He was the only politician or political leader to contact Lynn Tammy Connolly, the Gypsy Trantham lady, the night before she started her walk for justice, and that in its own speaks volumes. Alba don't have anybody of his stature to take over the party and lead it, but they've got a collective ability to do so. In Kenny McCaskill as a deputy leader, they've got a man of great integrity, great honour and great loyalty, one of the few who was prepared to stand beside Alec throughout all the darkest of days. So I would assume that Kenny will lead the party meantime. But there are others, such as obviously Neil Hanvey and Ash Regan, who are able to contribute a substantial amount towards the future of the party. I know it'll be very difficult for them to have their conference, which I think is due in November, because the massive absence of Alec will be so desperately felt by so many of them. They'll be as broken as we are. I would like to think that there will be some within the SNP who will consider rapprochement with Alba. I would like to consider that a constitutional convention will be on the cards and that Alba will have their part to play there. These may all seem like pipe dreams, but sometimes when something horrifically tragic like this happens, it concentrates the minds on the fact that life is always far, far too short, and that if we have a collective goal, a collective aim, then it is incumbent on each and every one of us to do everything that we can to bring that to fruition. So I wish those in Alba the best of success, but most of all, I wish success for Scotland, and I hope that Alex Salmond's legacy of the dream will never die will become the dream will be realised in his name.
Here. There is an opportunity, Lloyd, that people who say, oh, well, Alex Salmond, and they wrongly, eviscerated him. But now that he has sadly left us, it gives them an opportunity for them to hold out the hand to ALPA, to ISP, to all the different dispirited groups. This is the opportunity. Do you see it happening?
No, I don't see it happening, Roddy, and I don't see it happening for one simple reason. They do not have the same aim that the man we're talking about at the moment had, which was the achievement of the liberation and independence of our country. I do not believe that John Swinney had that as his aim. I knew from the moment I met Alec that it was his aim, but I don't believe that John has that aim, and I don't believe that those who have been over-promoted within the Scottish National Party, particularly in the Scottish Parliament, will be able to see that the way forward for them and for the movement being the important part of this, would be to reach out the hand. I think, unfortunately, because we're dealing with such second-rate individuals, that they will see this as the opportunity to finally vanquish the ISP, ALPA, and the rest of the movement and bring it what they believe is the SNP's sole right as the arbiter of the future of our country. I think they are such small-minded people that that's the way they are going to approach this current circumstance. And I have the indications of that from and I would recommend that everyone takes a look at this, John Swinney's contribution on the Laura Kuenssberg programme on the BBC this morning. That contribution for someone who would not be wearing the suit he's wearing or in the job that he's in without the man who he effectively disparaged simply, in my eyes, by commenting on him. Because if there's one person outside of Nicola Sturgeon that is genuinely the one to blame for the torture that Alex Salmond has had to go through over the past 4 or 5 years in relation to outstanding legal cases, it's the man who sat with the redacting pen and controlled deliberately the information that was provided to Alex's legal team. And that man is John Swinney. And until John Swinney is no longer the leader of either the Scottish National Party nor the Scottish Government, then our country will not move forward. I think it must have been so hard for Alec, particularly in this last week. Hearing Swinney and seeing John Swinney's behaviour at that meeting of the town criers with Mr. Starmer here in Edinburgh was one thing, because that was betrayal by someone whose career was effectively made by Alex Salmond. But at the beginning of the week, to have to listen to someone, the certain someone being Stephen Noon, who Alex Salmond gave this big break in politics, allowed Stephen Noon to be considered by the political glitterati as some intellectual powerhouse, to see all the things that Alec gave him, the vision that Alec presented, for that to be taken by someone as narrow-minded and as self-centered as Stephen Noon, to take his entire legacy and destroy it on the basis of it is not time now, despite the achievements of 2014. That must have been so hard for him to watch one after the other, people who he gave the opportunity to take part in this great cause of ours, to take, all of whom could have been in the crowd that day when we all stand outside the United Nations building and someone pulls the lanyard on that flag between the flag of Saudi Arabia and Senegal. That's what these people could have had. And they chose instead to stab their mentor in the back and in the front. How hard must that have been for him, and indeed for Moira?
Yeah. We've been talking around it. The show this week was actually, before the terrible tragic events of yesterday, was meant to be about the modern ragman's role. Phil, and we've referred to it a few times. And Alex's last tweet, I would just say, people said, why was he in North Macedonia? Well, folks, here's my guess. I don't know. But Scotland were playing in Croatia last night, and Alex liked his football as well as his horses. And it wouldn't surprise me, as soon as that speech was over, he was on his way to the game. But here was his last tweet, ladies and gentlemen, where we've used the phrase, it's a country, not a county. When Swinney went there, and my topic this week was going to be to you all, Phil, and everyone in here, is should we not have boycotted that? It was an insult to the nation of Scotland. I was surprised to see Michelle O'Neill there as well, and an insult to Wales, that the mayors of Peterborough and Middlesbrough were given the same platform as the leaders of Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. It was something that we should have boycotted and should continue to boycott.
Yeah, as Lloyd said, town criers meeting indeed, because that's pretty much what it is. This one should have been avoided, because there's the Scottish Government are nothing but a glorified council. We talked previously how Alex very wisely changed the name and earned the name change. We should change it back again, because these cunt clowns have reverted to type. They are now nothing more than a glorified council. So no, if they were serious about independence, they would have walked away from it and just declined attendance. And the truth bites. I don't know if anybody else picked up. I'm sure the viewers certainly will. But the rage in Lloyd's voice is palpable and righteous. I'm in, Lloyd. What's the plan for dealing with the shysters? I'm in. Whatever it is, it sickens me. And Alex would not have allowed this to happen. We wouldn't be in this situation if he hadn't made his biggest mistake. And I thought his biggest mistake was handing it over to Nicola, and it is. But that was in retrospect. That's easy to do retrospectively, and for him as well. But it's patently obvious to all of us that, I don't know when she was. I don't know when she was turned, but she was turned, and that betrayal that bites to the core is what hurts most. It sickens me. And I look back at the time working with Alex at Westminster. I thought, given my background in energy and construction and what or audits and such like, I'd be put into something like the Public Accounts Committee, because I've done a lot of commercial litigation, alternative disputes resolution and the like, adjudication, conciliation, arbitration, whatever. But when I was eventually moved into that, and thanks in no small part to Deirdre Brock, so that's a plus. But instead of being put in an energy role, I was placed with Stuart Hosey on the Treasury team, and others who were trusted to speak the word that the leadership want spoken, the words that the leadership wanted repeated. No men of independent thought or women of independent thought not allowed. You had to earn your stripes, as in we have to know what you're going to say and that you're on message. So one of the first things that Alex got me to do when he saw I wasn't happy was he sent me on a mission to Sri Lanka, where the Tamil Tigers were about to kick off again, okay? And the Westminster Foundation for Democracy sent a mission to the Sri Lankan Parliament to talk to them and explain devolution and how it would work and how it might pacify and prevent war and more bloodshed. So there's a Tory constitutional legal representative, the one and only Margaret for the Labour Party, which was, I tell you, going well with her, because, you know, working class guy for Coat Bridge. Margaret Curran, you're going to relate to in some way or another. And was my ex-MP actually from Aberdeenshire, a former Liberal Lib Dem MP. I can't remember his name now, sorry about that. But the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, you know, they were all into trying to affect, influence, and this was, I believed, a good mission to explain and how to stop bloodshed. But Alex saw, when he looked at his team, how to use people to the benefit, and he actually, I was in a bit of a downer, a bit pissed off. You know, what is this? I'm bored out of my nuts here. This is crap. I'm not interested in the accounts here. And I'm looking at this, and he picked stuff up, and he realised how to put a round peg in a round hole. So, you know, it was like instead of the whole square peg crap that you're getting, they don't function. Had he been on the leadership team there of the 6 that were there before, when we went down there as the 56, the 6 that are so that were already there had no idea how to manage people. They'd no idea how to, because why? Because they're from a small party, and it was all about looking after number one and climbing up the greasy pole and crapping on the people below and pushing folk out the way. There was no project management. There was no objective. You weren't looking at appraise, select, define, execute. You didn't look at process. You just looked about how to get on. And Alex had the vision to see that wasn't working, and he tried when he came in with some comments or some advice. It was then I should have known better. But I saw resistance to what I felt, what I knew as a project leader, as a project manager, what were the right ideas and the right approach. I saw it shot down, and I just continued to kowtow. Well, these people have been in this game for a long time. I'm new to politics. It's obviously me that's getting this wrong, but how wrong I was. And we can only echo the sentiment that Alex stated at the start with his interview with year one. His biggest mistake was resigning, and my God, it'd be a very, very different story today if he had not done so.
Correct, absolutely correct. We're coming towards the end. James, how did you feel when you saw this? I mean, it's just quite nauseating picture of our First Minister there. Oh, look, I'm with the mayors of Peterborough and Middlesbrough, and I'm at the big boys' table. I was embarrassed, enraged, and humiliated.
I would agree with you there, Robbie. The Scottish Resistance actually had 12 activists outside that building on the day of the event. Now, all the TV cameras from all the Channel 5, you had BBC, you had all the newspapers, they were all there filming and taking notes and all the rest of it. But they don't want to report these things, that there's activists out actually protesting. The Scottish Resistance are the main protest group in Scotland. We don't go in for violence, we don't disrupt, yet we are labelled extremists by certain newspapers like the Daily Mail and the Daily Express. We are extremists. So listen, if believing in freedom for every country in the world and justice for every person on this planet makes you an extremist, then I'm an extremist. We will continue. The Scottish Resistance will continue to protest at everything. Recently, we were in Grangemouth protesting against the closure of the oil refinery, and we met a lot of people there who joined the resistance when they saw how passionate we were to do something about getting Scotland free. We've got to get on the streets, folks. We have got to be more resistant against this imperial government in Westminster.
Yeah. If you're upsetting the Daily Mail and the Daily Express, you're obviously doing something right. That's all I can say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eva, the last word to you, because I know, you'd known the man for a long, long while. Here's one of you. Well, you look about 14 there, Eva. I'm not quite sure. You knew him for years. Would you think in a month of Sundays he would have attended with 17 or 18 mayors, but no Lord Provosts, and sat there like Swinney, thinking he'd done it, won a watch by getting invited?
Well, that photo's from April 1992, the general election campaign, and the candidate we had here in Clackmannanshire, and East Stirling as it was called then, was Andrew Brophy. So Alec was here for the day campaigning for Andrew, and it was one of the greatest campaigns of my life. Andrew was a fantastic candidate, as I've said before, and an amazing orator in the style of Jim Sillars and with the energy of Alex Salmond. So what a guy he was. On that day, we went for lunch. Alec ordered haddock and chips, and the waitress, Mrs. English, mother of our election agent, Mark English, came over to Alec with his lunch and said, "Salmon for Mr. Fish." It was unforgettable, and just one of these lovely occasions that you smile at, in the depths of despair as we are today. But that election in 1992, the SNP only held 3 seats, I think, and their share of the vote was around about 21%. That was in 1992. Little did we know then, although we hoped for it, that come 2007, Alec would become our First Minister, and then in 2011, he would secure that precious majority. These were the greatest of days and the greatest of times, and it is incumbent on us not just to bring them back again, but to take us to the destination and to create the Scotland that Alex Salmond gave his life for.
Well said. You made it through, Eva. Ladies and gentlemen, at that point, I apologise again that we're going out late. We've had some problems. As you can appreciate, what happened yesterday throughout everything. I hope this has helped in some ways, some of you. And until we see you and yours, take care.